I'm here with the great, incredibly talented, magnificent person, outstanding Finnish citizen, Niilo of Insomnium, to talk about Anno 1696, out February 24th on Century Media. I think that's the greatest introduction ever.
Thank you. It was very beautiful. Kind words. I'm blushing here.
For a Finn, that's saying a lot. That's saying a lot. So let's start off with one of the things that I thought was the most interesting about the backdrop of this record, which was a short story that you wrote, which the concept is based on. What inspired you to write a short story first and foremost?
Well, of course, we've done something similar with Winterscape, and a couple of years ago, I had this idea that why shouldn't we do it again? Because I personally like concept albums, and of course, writing is my other passion besides music. So maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, I already had this rough idea in my head, and I talked it to the other guys that why shouldn't we do a concept album in 17th century Finland? And they said, okay, cool, let's see what comes out of it. And then I proceeded writing the story when we had finished Argent Moon EP and continued. So I wrote the story, guys thought it was cool. So then we started making music that would fit the atmosphere, tragic, cold, dark atmosphere of the story. And one of the biggest influences has been this Finnish novel Suden Morsian, which is roughly translated to Bride of the Wolf or Wolf's Bride. There is an English version. I don't know if it's available anywhere. I've tried to find it. I would like to read it myself, but I think it's the best Finnish novel ever written. I maybe read it like 20 years ago or something for the first time, and I started thinking that if that story would have ended differently, it has a very sad ending, but don't want to spoil it, but if it would have ended differently and the main character would have survived, then what would have happened? So my story, Anno 1696, happens about 30 years after this Suden Morsian story, which is set in 1660s. So the timeline makes sense here. So it's kind of a tribute or sequel to that story. So I wanted to capture the same kind of feeling mood that is in that Suden Morsian book. And of course, set in this specific year because it was a very tragic year in Finnish history, actually the biggest catastrophe in Finland, because in 2 years, about, depending on the sources, 1/4, 1/3 of the population died because, to famine, to hunger. There were some very cold years. All the harvest was gone, and society back in those days couldn't cope with that kind of situation and couldn't save the people, and it was a just terrible situation in Finland and on the Swedish side as well. So it's a very bleak but very interesting era in history, and of course I try to make it as accurate as possible. This historical setting, or should be well, details should be right, but of course these mythical fantasy elements creep in while the story goes on, like in Winterscape. Yeah, so basically that's the kind of stuff that I like to write, and most of my stories are something like that they mix real history and mythical elements. So that's what happens also in this story.
So with the experience that you have now of having 2 concept records, having albums that are not concept albums, when you look back, which approach is easier and which one is more complex? Is it more difficult for you to create a concept album, or to create an album that just doesn't follow any necessarily storyline?
Of course, albums require more planning, especially when you finalize the tracks and the lyrics and the order. So it all has to make sense, and you have to lock the first song and the last song quite early, so you know how to begin the lyrics and end it. And in the middle, you can do some wheeling and dealing and change the order. And it might not be that crucial, but compared to a normal album, of course, it's more complex and requires planning. But I like concept albums, and when they are done well, it's a kind of deeper experience to the listener. If someone likes to read all the lyrics and the stories and like delve deep into the whole thing, so I think it's very cool. And I remember already when I was in kindergarten and I was going through my parents' vinyl collection, and there was these cool 70s prog albums there with concepts. They had these amazing stories and pictures, and I remember just going through them, and these are so cool. This story must be awesome. And so already at the very young age, I was digging concept albums.
When it comes to writing the story, in this case, this short story that you wrote, and then converting that short story into a concept album, how does that process work? Do you take pieces of the lyrics of the story that you wrote? Do you take just the idea of where you are and where the characters are going? How do you transfer from one medium into another?
Well, it is a tricky process, and there is wheeling and dealing. And of course, starting the lyrics is kind of easy because you have the story there, so you know what you are gonna write about. But then like picking that, okay, this song should be that part of the story or that part, and tell things from that perspective. All those decisions, there are many things that affect it, like especially how the song sounds like. What is the feeling atmosphere? So that kind of defines which chapter or part of the story will that song deal with. Like, for example, Lillian was the first single. It has more of this hopeful, lighter mood than many other songs. And so I chose this part in the story that tells about this moment when this couple meets for the first time, how they fell in love, with kind of this light amidst the darkness. And that fits that song very well, I think. All those other songs are quite dark and bleak, but this one is kind of hopeful. A golden memory from the past before it all was ruined. So there is some planning, of course, needed, and you can't put the whole story in the lyrics. But then on the other hand, you can tell some extra things in the lyrics, like this ballad song, The Unrest. It actually tells about things that are not mentioned in the short story. So kind of another kind of glimpse into the relationship of this main couple there. When this man starts to realize that there's something funny going on with his wife. Wife is just watching the woods in the night and being restless, and there's something going on. And it tells about that thing, which is not actually told in the short story. So they kind of weave together the lyrics and the short story. So when you read them all, it makes more sense, I hope.
When it comes to the sound, you mentioned that outside of Lillian, the album is pretty dark. I felt like this record has a different overall sound approach, not just in terms of the sound that you're getting, but even in terms of the production behind it. Is this more of a doom, post-doom record and not necessarily a straightforward melodic death metal from start to finish?
Yeah, well, I will let other people define what it is. We just make music that comes from the soul, and we try to make as cool things as possible, and then others can define it. But I think for some albums, we are something else than just melodic death metal band. There's much more going on. There's the doomy stuff and the black metal stuff and a lot of progressive parts. And so I think we have evolved as a band. And if you compare our latest albums to our 3 first albums, they sound a bit different, of course, but it's still the same band, I think. And the melodies, the themes, the core of Insomnium. I think that's the same. But yeah, production-wise, we deliberately wanted it to have this kind of colder, harsher, not so polished sound, more of this 90s approach. And that's why we chose Mr. Jamie Gomez Arellano, who has done great stuff with bands like Moonspell and Paradise Lost. And he is a kind of old school guy. He doesn't re-amp the guitar, so he doesn't use drum samples. So everything is what we do in the studio. He will use those guitar sounds, those drum sounds. So it's kind of an old school guy, and we wanted that kind of approach to this album. And so this story and these songs require that kind of approach.
It felt like also from your the vocals are very dynamic, and I want to get into that, but just your own specific vocal approach on this record, it felt like you were a little bit deeper into the sound, which added to that more dark vibe that the overall record has. Do you see it as well, that the vocals on this album are not necessarily more in the forefront? They're a little bit more, I don't know, incorporated into what the overall sound experience is like?
It can be, but you have to blame the sound engineer Jamie for the mix, and I think it's a good balance. But like every album is a bit different, that how clearly the vocals are they in the front or where they are. So, but I think it's a good balance right now.
Yeah, and I'm not blaming him. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying it works well with the overall darkness of the album. I just felt like it was a little bit different from, let's say, the previous record. But I don't think you can. Yes. Yeah, but I don't think you can make this album into this concept and into this story sound like the previous album. It wouldn't work. This album has to have a more unique experience. Otherwise, the story doesn't come through. Yeah,
exactly. And like I like a lot how Hard Like a Grave sounds like, but this time we wanted to have a different kind of sound and not just copy what we did previously. I think it's a good method to think about the songs you have and the album, and then what kind of production is needed here, and we chose this kind of approach.
And there's a lot of acoustic guitars on this record. Was that driven by the experience that you were trying to portray with the story? Was that driven by the atmosphere that you wanted to create for this specific concept?
Well, I think all the composers in the band went into the same mood and mindset after we had the story was finished and the guys read it. And I'm quite sure our drummer hasn't even read it yet, and he will never read it. But other guys, I believe, have read it. At least they have commented. So we kind of had the same atmosphere in our minds when we were writing music, and a lot of acoustic guitars came in there, and the intro specifically, I think it fits this kind of 17th century story very well. And like many songs actually start with acoustic guitar, and it's just the feeling that comes from within us when we think about this story. So I hope it conveys the right feeling and atmosphere.
Now, you have two guest vocalists on this album. You have Sakis and Joanna. Did the songs call for you to get these guest vocalists, or did you think of the songs and think of of having guest vocalists almost simultaneously?
Well, the songs required these, so we kind of rarely have guest vocalists. And with White Christ song, the first time we played it at rehearsals, everybody thought, okay, this has this Rosenchrist vibe in it. That then we started joking that, hey, we should ask Sakis to sing this, and then maybe in the next rehearsals we were already like, yeah, let's really ask Sakis. It's a good idea. Then Markus Vanhala has been touring with Sakis before, so he asked the guy, and he was pleased. He liked the song, and it became one of the coolest songs, and he even appears in the video. I think that's maybe the coolest music video we've done. It looks really, really good, and Then God-Forsaken song, also Markus Vanhala's composition, and in the demo phase he used some shamanistic female vocal sample there, kind of give the idea of what he was trying to do, and it was kind of essential part of the whole thing. And so we wanted to do it like real, with a real vocalist, and but it required this special kind of voice. And for a while we thought some options that which singers have this kind of very elven maiden voice from the forest, mysterious,
very earthy, like folky, earthy sound to it.
Yes, and very special voice. And then of course we asked Johanna, and she knew the band before. Like in Finland, she's a very renowned singer, kind of a mainstream figure, but she actually also likes metal, and she knew the band, and actually she has also done a concept album which is kind of based on this Sudenmorsian, Bride of the Wolf thing in the past. So it's a nice coincidence. So I think she could relate to the story as well and knew what we were singing about. So she was happy to be along, and she did her thing there, and it became so much cooler than it ever was in the demo. She just did amazing stuff there, so many layers and cool things that kind of elevated it to another level. And there will be one more music video from this God-Forsaken song. Actually, it's out on the same day as the album, so I haven't even seen it yet, but Johanna should be in the video as well. So we were freezing our asses off in the snow and filming it, so it better be a good one.
God-Forsaken is a unique song on the record. I mean, outside of the fact that this is the first song in Insomnium history that has female vocals in it, it's a unique song in terms of the sound, the more folkiness. It sounds very Heilung just with an Insomnium touch to it. It's such a unique, beautiful track. When you were putting together this song, did you perhaps have the sensation that this is one of those tracks that's going to become part of the Insomnium folklore for all of these different unique things that it offers?
I'm sure everybody had a good feeling about the song right from the start, and it was one of the first songs that was made for this album, and it kind of paved the way for the sound, what we're gonna do here. And like, if I would have to pick just one song to represent the whole album, it would be this one. So it has very cold, dark, kind of black metalish feel, and a lot of these folky elements as well. And there's acoustic parts, and there's clean vocals, and Johanna's vocals. There's a lot of different elements. And but only after the album is ready and you start to hearing other people's comments and you can digest the finished versions, then you start to kind of realize that which songs actually are the best ones or the most meaningful ones. You don't necessarily see that yourself while you are in the process and making it. And many times in the studio, it can change which songs feel like the best ones and which are the not so good ones. So it can change. And so only when the record is done, you kind of you know that, okay, this is a good one, this will work live, and this will be one of the video songs. So
is it difficult for you when you have a concept album to choose which ones are going to be the singles? Because when the album is not a concept record, it may be a little bit easier to pick songs because there's not a backdrop story to it. But when you're releasing a concept album and you start putting out singles, you're kind of giving a glimpse. It's almost like a preview of what the story and what the record is going to be. Does that make it more difficult for you?
Yes, and well, we chose Lillian as the first single, and like I said, it has this more hopeful sound than the others, and also the video looks brighter. There is a happy couple kissing each other, so it may not represent the whole story that well. So we thought about this in advance. So we started telling a little bit of the story in advance. So a couple of weeks before the video, we started releasing these quotes and from the text from the short story, so people would get into the right mood before they would see the Lillian video. So they would know that something darker is happening, something dark is going on, very tragic story, so they can better interpret this first video and single when it comes out. So if you have a concept album, you have to think about these kind of things.
When you mentioned all the composers in the band, when you look at Insomnium as a whole, is this a team effort every single time, or there's a little bit more weight on your shoulders because of the image that you have and being the front man and everything else that goes with it?
It's a team effort, of course, always. And Markus Vanhala composed most of the stuff this time. He was the most active. Me, Jani, Ville, we all did some songs as well. So there's 4 guys making the music. Well, I did all the lyrics this time. Of course, it's my story, so it made sense that I make the lyrics. But it's a team effort, of course. And when it comes to making interviews, I might be the one who gets to do most of them. But other guys work as well for the interviews and stuff like that. So definitely, in every sense, it's a group effort, and none of us could do this on his own.
The bar that you guys have set for Insomnium, it's so high. The level of excellence that you guys have done with every single record is so high. Does that become a burden, or does that continue to motivate you guys to push that bar even higher?
Well, I don't think we're thinking about that too much. Well, I think with Winter's Gate, we kind of both our artistic freedom that we have the confidence to do what we want and try something that might sound crazy at first, but if we feel that this is a good thing, we want to do this, then like our fans will appreciate it and they will get it. So we don't think about too much like the previous stuff when we are composing. But naturally, the bar is set somewhere after 9 albums now and 1 EP. And of course, we don't want to go under the bar. We are kind of perfectionists in many ways, and we don't want to repeat ourselves. We don't want to make the same album twice, all the same songs. And often it happens that someone brings a riff that others say, okay, this sounds a bit too much like that old song, like we have to change it a bit, like do a better version. So we definitely don't want to copy ourselves. And so there is this passion still very much burning inside to make best possible music, best new songs we are capable of, new kind of albums that people can be like excited and thrilled about. So we really have that spark still, same spark as in our 20s.
I got 2 more questions for you, and one is related to the album, but the other one is not. So I'm going to start off with that one. Considering that writing is your second passion, outside of short stories, would you consider writing a novel or start to divide your passion a little bit more strongly and push that other side of you into the forefront and become more of an author, not just a musician?
Yes, and I'm doing that actually right now. And actually, since the start of the pandemic, I've been writing a novel. The version number 3 is now in the works. It's 500 pages roughly, so it's a long one. And I have the publisher already in Finland, and the editor, and she kindly comments my stuff, and we try to make it as good as possible. So that also is a kind of team effort. It's different than making music, making albums, but it's a very interesting process. And actually, the story it's kind of continuing the Winter's Gate story and set in that world. So set in medieval times, medieval Europe, where some strange things have happened, and the world is a bit different than how we know it. So I've been writing that story for like almost 3 years now, and let's see when it is ready.
Wow, that is very interesting. So last question for you. You guys have a North American tour upcoming very soon with Enslaved. How excited are you guys to finally come back to North America after what happened at the beginning of the pandemic? And second, how much of this new record are you guys planning on including on the set list?
Yeah, it's very cool to come back. Well, actually, we were just in Florida last week.
Yeah, that's true.
Which was also very, very nice and a very fun cruise again. But doing a full tour, yeah, it's about time. And I think it's going to be a good tour, very good package. I think Enslaved and us, we both have been doing this kind of progressive and black end stuff lately. So I think it's a good fit. And most people in the audience will like both bands, I'm quite sure. And then there's the opening band as well, of course. So it's a very good package, and we come to Canada as well, of course. Hope to see you there.
Yeah, I'll definitely be at the Toronto show. You're not going to miss me. I'm going to be there for sure.
Cool. And what was your other question here?
How much of the new record are you guys planning on including on the set list?
Let's see. We haven't yet decided the set list, but I'm quite sure we're going to play the video songs at least, and maybe some more. So maybe not the whole album, but like over half of it. But of course, we have to play the old stuff as well. Like we have now recorded almost 100 songs in our career, so there's many songs that we could pick. It comes harder every time.
And the previous record, is not like you guys got to tour on that album or even the EP. So that you guys got a lot of material.
We do. Yeah, we should maybe play some of the EP stuff as well, because very few people have heard it live yet.
So a lot of things to be excited about this tour. I hope everybody's buying tickets. I'm going to keep promoting it here because I want to see the Toronto venue packed with fans for this date. I'm looking forward to it. I already marked it on my calendar. So the next time we'll speak in person. I'll see you in Toronto. Thank you very much for your time, Niilo.
Thank you very much.
Take care.